Alrighty, hello everyone. It's Tim again. I've been doing a little bit of work to my 2017 Chevy SS. There it is in the background. Hopefully I've improved it a little bit. As you guys know, I've made a series of videos about my purchase and install of a Whipple Supercharger, which by the way still works marvelously. However, one thing I didn't think about, and other people in the SS community that have a Whipple Supercharger are experiencing, is failure of idler pulleys. So the Whipple Supercharger, or at least the kit I have, or their most standard kit, is driven by the serpentine belt, the accessory belt that then also drives the water pump, that also drives the alternator, and so forth. And that entire system is designed for a water pump and an alternator. The drag or parasitic loss of running an alternator and a water pump after having done a little bit of math is probably around 11 horsepower and probably around 3 to 4 horsepower on the alternator side. The alternator, that may sound a little bit high, but I thought I would caution on the high side just because we have electric power steering, which again shouldn't be a lot of load if you're going straight. It might be load if that motor is doing a lot of work. But still, the entire serpentine belt system with the stock idler pulleys, with the stock bracketry and whatnot, is to design forces in, say, the 10 to 16 or so horsepower range. Once we add a supercharger, and mine doesn't even make a lot of boost. I think I have 7 pounds of boost, so roughly half an extra atmosphere. The parasitic drag of that is in the 30 horsepower range, 30 to 40 horsepower, if people are running smaller pulleys and making more boost. I'll try and somehow put some math and some charts and whatnot in here on how I came up with those numbers. So we're putting forces generated by 40 plus horsepower on a system whose idler pulleys and brackets, etc., were designed for roughly 1/3 or 1/4 of that. So the pulley that most commonly breaks is the one right before the crank pulley on the tight side of the entire belt formation. It's a stamped steel pulley. Mine is actually in really, really good shape. I don't see any sort of indication or reason as to why this would have had to, it's not an imminent failure. But after doing the math, which again I'll try and somehow blend in here somewhere, this pulley is seeing upwards of 700 pounds of force, the belt pulling it downwards. And that's just absolutely not what it's designed for. So the solutions that I put in is I got a CNC aluminum idler pulley. It's the Revolution 70 millimeter idler pulley. I think I got it from LSX Innovations. I'll kind of put the part number and whatnot down below. And then the other thing that I put on is a bracket, a billet bracket, to replace, or it's called a power steering delete. It's the ICT billet power steering delete. Since our cars have electric power steering, obviously you don't have a power steering pump. And so this bracket with an idler on it is placed where a power steering pump would be, just so that the serpentine belt runs properly and applies the proper amount of force in the right directions. So supporting this pulley is this aluminum bracket, which is actually hollow and rather dinky, I'll say. I can tell though that there's been some engineering to it. Like for example, it has gussets, right? And it has gussets supporting it in the direction to support the downward force that this bracket experiences from the belt pulling on it. So there was definitely some engineering effort that went into this part. However, it was engineered for, 10 or 12 or 14 or something like that horsepower worth of aux load, whereas now this bracket has to contend with 40 horsepower of aux load. And the failure mode for these, and I'll try and put some pictures in, is that they just break off here. Like they break along this side and they break here. The whole thing falls down, your belt goes bananas and rips itself to pieces, and it's all bad news. So anyway, now we've got parts in that hopefully will support the extra drag of the driven supercharger. And here's some video clips of me trying to do the install. The whole thing took maybe 20 or 25 minutes from beginning to end, so it was really pretty easy. On the ITC billet kit, everything was included that was needed. The idler pulley required a 3.3 millimeter backspace washer. I found that an M16, metric M16 flat washer was absolutely perfect. The inside diameter was exactly what we needed to go over the bearing support. The external diameter was exactly right to go inside the part of the pulley. And it happened to be, 3.2 millimeters thick instead of 3.3, which is very well within the tolerance. So anyway, here, enjoy the clips. If you have any more thoughts, I'll add them at the end. Thanks. All right, let's actually take a look at the components that we're taking out and putting back in. So what we've taken out is this top pulley that might be the power steering pulley. It is mounted to what looks like a fairly sturdy and beefy aluminum bracket. right, which sits up on the top right of the motor. These are the ones that tend to break right here, snap off, and the entire middle section of it breaks off, just given how long the lever arm is and the force that's pulling down on this pulley. And that actually surprised me until I turned around and saw that it's actually completely hollow and really fairly dinky. So, I mean, the wall thickness is maybe 125 thousandths. And I'm sure it's engineered really well to drive a water pump and an alternator, but I do not believe it's well enough engineered to support an extra 30 to 40 horsepower of parasitic supercharger drag. So anyway, this is out. This pulley is out. And what we're putting in is this bracket, which will replace this bracket. And then it comes with a number of spacers and a replacement pulley, also with a nice Timken bearing in it to replace that part. The other idler pulley that we're replacing is the one between the crank pulley and the alternator. This is a kind of a stamped steel pulley. This is the one that seems to break first on most Whipple Supercharged Chevy SS's. You know, mine actually looks really good. I have it zip tied together, so I mean, I'm going to keep it in case I have some sort of failure and need to put this back on. I don't see any signs whatsoever of metal fatigue, but at the same time, it's just a piece of drawn, stamped, whatever you want to call it, steel with a bearing in it. And what we're taking this out, the failure is typically, well, it's hard to see. It's down in there circumferentially, and it basically the outer belt touching ring breaks off of the inner part that has the bearing in it. What we're replacing it with is this pulley, which is a CNC aluminum pulley, also with a nice Timken bearing in it. And the load just transfers to the bearing better, I feel like, than on this sort of stamped steel part, if I were to compare the two. So this is the back towards facing the motor, and this would be the front, you know, facing, say, the radiator or heat exchanger, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, hopefully I can get the back spacing right. I was able to find a washer that goes back on here. It's actually a stainless M16 washer. I got it at Ace Hardware. It seems to be exactly the right thickness, and I'm going to put it on now, and with a little luck, hopefully the alignment or kind of tracking, backspacing, whatever you want to call it, will be appropriate, and everything will fit nicely. I did do a tiny bit of clearancing on the alternator bracket. It doesn't seem to need it. I did some anyway. I'll show you that here in a second. All right, here's my attempt to show you what I clearanced a little bit. So this nub is what the idler pulley runs on. And I did a tiny bit of clearancing right there. You can kind of see the scratches in the aluminum on this bracket. And then over here on this side, I also did a tiny bit of clearancing to make sure that that pulley doesn't rub against the casting of this bracket. It doesn't look like much, but it already didn't seem to need any when I first gave it a trial fitting. But anyway, that's the clearancing that I did that I talked about a second ago. Alright, so here is the pulley installed, just this idler pulley down here. I'm a little bit not so happy with the way that the bolt sits in there, but it's torqued down to what it should be. I put just one dot of blue Loctite on it as well to maybe help a little bit. On this side, if it would focus, you can see that there's clearance, and if I go down here to spin it, it spins happily without touching anywhere. I don't think I can get the other angle to show you the other clearancing, but this seems to fit rather nicely now. All right, let's put the power steering bracket or power steering delete bracket on. That's this guy right here. And I'm going to use just one tiny dot of blue on it. The instructions don't actually call for that, but it just makes me feel a little better. I'm going to start with this one. Spacer goes on here. There. Dot of blue. Never come off juice. Or kinda come off difficultly juice. Alright, so that's on. Last thing is this pulley. Not sure if you guys can see it, but this all came with a kit. So a washer, a bolt, this machined aluminum piece, which fits into the bearing very snugly, and then the whole thing goes on as you would kind of expect it to. Another reason I like to put just a touch of Loctite on, or Permatex in this case, I guess, is that I don't really like herking on threads in aluminum, and this makes me feel like maybe without a whole bunch of herking and torquing, the bolt will stay where it belongs. Alrighty, so this is what it all looks like now. This is how far we've gotten. So we've got this pulley bracket in, we've got that pulley down there in, everything spins freely. If I try and look at it from here, it looks to me very much like as though everything lines up wonderfully. Like we don't really have an offset problem that I can see if it would focus. And yeah, so now comes the fun part of trying to put the belt back on. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so everything runs great and tracks well, but again, one thing I'm noticing is that somehow the geometry is a little bit different. My belt tensioner used to be around 40% and 60% on each side. Looks like right now we're on 20 here on this side. And gosh, 55% or so on this other side. What that makes me think is that I need a longer belt. Something about this install has made this belt shorter. I mean, obviously the belt's not shorter, but the geometry over the rollers is such that now the tensioner doesn't sit where it used to. Interesting, something to think about, I guess.